Hi, I'm Rowan, and welcome back to the Scarlet Quill Society for our first meeting of 2024, sort of. I'm gonna front right away that our actual first meeting of 2024 was super cursed. Um, Documents were lost, notes were lost. What we were gonna do next month was lost somehow. Um, so Christine, who is technically the boss of me, has agreed to sit in because she's also my co-writer, and I blackmailed her just a little bit and ask all of the questions that people want to know so that we don't have to bother anyone else trying to fix our curse. One of the things that actually was very cursed last month was how badly I screwed up our land acknowledgement. So bear with me as I try to get it right this time. Yeah, right. As we move into a virtual world with so much virtual connection, um, it becomes more and more difficult to talk about a land acknowledgement, but it also becomes more and more important to talk about a land acknowledgement and to talk about what we owe to the land that we live on and to the people who are indigenous to that land, which in the case of Yeah Right, and certainly in my case, because I live on a confluence of rivers, um, in a very, very fertile area, is many peoples, the Multnomah, the Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, the bands of Chinook, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, the Molalla, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. There's overlap there. Before Oregon was settled by white settlers, there were more than 60 tribes living on that land. And today there are only 9 federally recognized tribes. Some of that is conglomeration, but a lot of that is frankly genocide. And we owe a debt that probably can never be repaid to those people. And so as part of our land acknowledgement and to make it more than words, Yeah Right donates to the Naya Family Center, which provides culturally specific programs and services to guide people in the direction of personal success and balance through cultural empowerment. And we encourage you to know whose land you are on if you are a settler, if you are the heir of settlers and colonists, and to acknowledge your debt to the land however you can, whether that is through good stewardship, monetary gifts, um, acknowledgement, however you possibly can. The other piece of housekeeping that we have to do this month, because we are talking about copyright, a term that's near and dear to everyone's heart, is that I have to do some personal housekeeping. I'm a lawyer. If you hear whining and complaining, I'm a lawyer with a dog, and the dog is not excited about me recording ever. If you haven't been to one of these sessions before, there's a cat literally right there. There's going to be other cats probably on this couch. There's the dog. This is not my housekeeping. My housekeeping is that I am probably not licensed in your jurisdiction. The jurisdiction that I'm licensed in does not have a large population. Um, I am not giving you legal advice. I am talking this month in a general sense about copyright, and I am talking about copyright only in the context of United States federal law. I am not talking about your state or your province, local trade secret law. You may have local intellectual property protections. Intellectual property protections vary by state, by country, by locality. Um, and you need to look up what those protections are where you are. But because the United States is a global force of copyright law, because the United States has a big reach, and because Hollywood, frankly, because Disney, literally, here on this first month in which a Disney property containing Mickey Mouse has gone out of copyright, is such a juggernaut. we think that this discussion is going to be relevant to you. Certainly, you're listening to this in English, whether or not you've taken advantage of YouTube's AI local subtitling or not. And since you are listening to this in English, we are presuming that you're interested in publishing in English, which is probably going to bring you at some point into US copyright jurisdiction. So with that out of the way, this is not advice. If you have specific questions, you need to ask a lawyer who is licensed where you live, and who is licensed in the copyright law of the country or countries that you are interested in, whether that is your country or another country. So that's out of the way. Let's jump right in with Mickey Mouse, because we used to say copyright in the US, copyright adheres on creation and it lasts however long it's been since Disney died. And that is a classic United States copyright measurement. It's the life of the creator plus X number of years. And now what we get to say is you have to look up when the work was created to find out how long the copyright lasts. There are other kinds of copyright, one of which is called works for hire, where a corporation owns the copyright. That's another exception to life of the creator, because a corporation is not a person. Supreme Court, not a person. It's corporation. It's an entity. It's not a person. So what we get to talk about on several levels is, can you use Steamboat Willie right now? Can you use Mickey Mouse? And the answer is no. No, you absolutely cannot. Can I use the Mickey Mouse that is in that cartoon? So here's the thing. Disney has a lot of money. And with that lot of money, Disney employs a lot of lawyers. And like hopefully all, but realistically most lawyers, Disney's lawyers know that there are three kinds of intellectual property protections in the US. There's copyright, there's trademark, and there's trade secret. And trade secrets are like the formula for Coca-Cola. It is protectable as long as it's a secret. And once the secret is out, it is no longer protectable at all, but you may have a cause of action for disrupting the secret and for spreading the secret. Dog is making really gross lip smacking noises, and I really hope none of it's coming through. So trade secrets, obviously Disney's published cartoons are not trade secrets. But what you might have noticed is in the last few years, instead of putting like an MGM lion roar, or the castle with the sparkle at the beginning of a Disney movie, or Pixar's hopping lamp, Disney has been putting that little section of Steamboat Willie, that's the only section that's recognizable out of the cartoon, that's Mickey Mouse going, or whatever whistle, and it is out of the side of his mouth. It's not just my weird whistle, but I have a weird whistle. I'm from that. And so you go, that's now a trademark. That means the source or origin. Trademark is a visual symbol that designates the source or origin of goods in a market. So like the Apple on Apple computers, that's their trademark. Steamboat Willie is now Disney's trademark, and Disney says, can't use it. And now they can police it as a trademark instead of a copyright. Trademark does not expire while it's being used. You still can't have Steamboat Willie. What can you have? You can have Alice in Wonderland. Congratulations. And you could have Alice in Wonderland back in 1996 or whenever America McGee's Alice was released. There are a lot of things you can have. Greensleeves. Greensleeves never had a copyright. Greensleeves is the classic. There is a filk about how you can filk to Greensleeves. about how it's the one that you don't have to ask permission. The chorus of the tune literally just goes, green sleeves of the tune you want, green sleeves has no copyright. So copyright it's not forever. But as far as you are concerned, as a person, as an author, it is forever because you're going to be dead by the time your copyright expires. So functionally for you and what you can protect of your stuff, your copyright will not expire for you. It will expire at some point for your estate, but not for you. Which is one of the things the Tolkien estate is bumping into. Is when does copyright expire?
Can I
Yeah, please do.
back you up just a
Don't let me
little
just
bit?
talk.
Because I think I think we could do with just a very standard definition of copyright. What exactly is a copyright?
Oh wow. Yeah, so that's a really hard question actually. Um Copyright is a bunch of rights. It is in law school, I'm gonna just like visual aid myself here. I'm a knitter. These are knitting needles, but it is functionally a bundle of sticks, right? So in law school, they teach you that property rights, of which copyright is one, is a bundle of sticks. You have the right to own, you have the right to license, you have the right to protect, you have the right to sue if people trespass this thing. You have the right to sell, you have the right to authorize people to do things with, this is the right to license, by the way, that I already mentioned, the right to let people do things with your property. You have the right to let people change your property. So you have all of these rights, and all of these rights are copyright, and copyright adheres, it attaches, it glues to the work on creation. And for copyright purposes, creation is not when you have the idea, not when you have the brilliant thought in the shower, not when you scribble some notes down, although you have a copyright in those notes, but when you fix your work in a tangible medium of expression. And the actual phrase is original works of authorship fixed in any tangible medium of expression now known or later developed. This was very important when computers were being developed, right? So can you write down, is this a tangible medium of expression? And there were arguments about whether storing something in binary code on a disk was the same thing as physically writing the letters. But the law has changed, the law has adapted, case law has been developed, and it is, whether it's stored on your local hard drive or in the cloud, there is a group of ones and zeros somewhere on a server that is your thing that you made digitally, and that counts as fixed in a tangible medium of expression. And the other thing about the tangible medium of expression is from which they can be perceived, reproduced, or otherwise communicated directly or with the aid of a machine or device. So you can go to an art museum and you can see a piece of art on the wall, and you can copy that down, you can take a photograph of it. This is fixed in a tangible medium of expression, this canvas or this board on which it is painted, and the oil paints or acrylics or watercolors, whatever medium the artist used, you can perceive it, it can be reproduced, it can be communicated, you can hand that to someone. So those are the important things about copyright. And we put in our post this month the definition of copyright, what's included in copyright, like literary works, musical works, including lyrics, dramatic works, visual art, dance, motion pictures, sound recordings, architecture, all of these things are copyrightable. And in each case, copyright exists as soon as it is fixed in that tangible medium of expression. So we have a lot of people ask, I've had a lot of people ask me, certainly it's a big cocktail party question. As a lawyer and an editor, can you imagine how many times I get asked this question? Do I need to copyright this? And I can't, it just makes my brain record scratch every time. And I know what they're asking and I know what they're trying to ask, but I don't have a way of communicating how fractally incomprehensible that question is, because you did, unless it's an idea, in which case you can't. Like if somebody comes up to me and starts describing the plot of their novel, I can go write that novel. That's not copyright. They have no copyright in that. The plot of that novel is your trade secret, effectively, right? Like, it's protectable as long as it's a secret. If you are taking steps to keep it a secret, if you tell this to me in confidence, yes, I am violating your intellectual property rights. Yes, I am violating a contract that I had with you to keep this secret. Yes, I am committing all kinds of ethical violations, not just as a lawyer, who has a duty of confidentiality, but as a human being. I would be a shitty friend, right? But I'm not violating your copyright. That's the one thing I'm not violating. And if you've written it down, you have copyright. You don't need to do anything else. So, with that said, under United States federal law, if you want to sue someone for violating your copyright, you do need to register the work with the Register of Copyrights, Registrar of Copyrights. And there's a process, and it's not actually cheap. And so it's often not worth it, unless and until you need to sue. This is one of the reasons that people talk about, and this does not work. This has no legal effect. This is one piece of legal advice I'm going to give you. Mailing your work to yourself has no legal effect. None. None. Do you know how easy it is to put something in an envelope? Do you know how easy it is to mail yourself an unsealed envelope and put something in it later? This is not evidentiary. This is not, nobody's going to be like, oh, well, there's a postmark on this envelope marked 1952. It must have been written then. You weren't even alive in 1952. Settle down. So like, but whatever proof you can produce about when you created it is going to be evidence of when the copyright adhered. And in order to sue someone for violating your copyright, you have to prove that you had the copyright when they did their thing and that they knew about your thing. This is actually really big in music copyright because there's only so many brilliant riffs. So the two big suits that people may still know about are Ice Ice Baby and Under Pressure. Are they the same song? I am firmly in the yes, that's the same song camp. And it's funny because I was listening to an interview with Vanilla Ice many years after that, and he was like, well, it's obviously not the same song. Their song goes ding 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 ding, and our song goes ding 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 ding. And I'm like, you just sang the same thing twice, right? The other one is the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Danny California, and Tom Petty's Last Dance with Mary Jane are also in that. Listen to them, form your own opinion. That one may be a closer call. They're thematically very similar. They're both very, you'll see when you listen to them. And I would play you some clips, but they're copyrighted.
So, but kind of related to that. So, we get this question all the time. How much of a song can I use in my book? Can I quote
None.
lyrics from the song?
Nope.
Right.
None.
What about fair use? What, you know?
Okay, so fair use. Thank you for getting to that. God, fair use. US copyright law balances protecting discourse with protecting intellectual property. Discourse means that you need to be able to talk about something. You need to be able to say it exists. You need to be able to critique it. You need to be able to review it. And you need to be able to do that in public forums. It nearly killed me to say forums instead of fora. I need you to know that. However, it does not protect your right to steal that and to use it in your book. As a general rule, there is no fair use in fiction. The fair use exception exists so that you can be CinemaSins or cinema therapy, so that you can review or summarize a work in such a way, because this is where fair use ends, right? You cannot take the heart of the work. You cannot make it unnecessary for someone to engage with the work itself by reproducing that much of the work, whether or not you are in nonfiction. You can do it for critique. Like, I'm talking about these songs. I'm talking about the fact that these songs exist. In your book, you can mention that a song exists. That's just a fact. You cannot include the copyrighted lyrics of that song. Here, hang on. Stephen King, and this is just like, this is not an endorsement of Bag of Bones. This is the first Stephen King book I could put my hand on it without knocking stuff down on the dog. Stephen King uses song lyrics notoriously. He loves music. He loves using music. He uses music not just because he connects with the lyrics or because his characters connect with the lyrics, but to set time and place. Bag of Bones is set in the present and then in the past, and it juxtaposes these two things, and it uses music from the present and the past, minstrel show music, modern music, to help anchor the reader's sense of place and time. He does this also a ton in all of his work on the 60s. He has sort of this batch of work dealing with the cultural moment that is the 60s from a very Stephen King perspective, right? Like, somebody's like maybe going to eat a monster. But he uses the music that is of that time, that is part of that experience. And every time he uses music, just thought of a really good, he gets permission. So there's an acknowledgements page in every Stephen King book that looks like this, and it is the list of the permissions that his publisher has gotten to reproduce copyrighted works. So he'll have, maybe, I'm trying to pull this back to where you can't see what the actual works are, some quotes. He's got permissions for those. In Misery, he used some lyrics from 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. I cannot for the life of me remember if that's just Paul Simon or Simon and Garfunkel.
I think it's Paul Simon, but
I think it's Paul Simon too. But he references it. He doesn't actually use it as a song. The character is reading a column of divorce notices in the paper, and he wants to draw a contrast between the order the names are listed in case the reader doesn't necessarily make that connection. Most of these divorce notices have the woman's name listed first. And so he says, oh, well, I think Doris is saying slip out the back, Jack. And Angela's saying make a new plan, Stan. Janine's saying drop off the key, Lee. But I don't remember what the guy's name was. You know, Tom, the only man who's listed first. What's he saying? He's saying, let me out. What I just did is fair use because we needed to be able to talk about the book in this context. You still have to read Misery if you want to know the story, if you want to know any of the every possible content warning on this book. Of course, medical trauma, kidnapping, abuse, caretaker abuse, substance abuse. It's I like it. I think that it's one of the books that is a very, very subtle treatise on how to write and what the writing process might look like. The book that the character is writing within the book is horrifically racist. Just incredibly racist. I want to off the top of my head right now. It's so racist. But anyway, you got to get that permission to use it in your fiction. And so if you are writing a fiction book and you're like, oh, this Florence and the Machine song really speaks to me and I want to include it and I want to use the lyrics and I want to use the voice. Unless you are ready to pay a lot of money to Florence Pugh's publisher, consider not. Consider saying a song came on and the lyrics made me feel like this, and the singer's voice soared and is breathy. And every time I say this piece of advice, I get this flashback to another piece of critique, which is Jenny Trout reads 50 Shades. And that author actually, I think this is the 50 Shades critique, actually did this, right? And says a song came on and the singer's breathless voice is, you know, talking about these lyrics. And the issue is that the author of the book released a playlist, which is fine to do. Just say on Twitter, like, here are the songs I was listening to while I wrote this. People love that. People love to share that, or to just say like, okay, well, this is the soundtrack. If you're going to stream it, the artists are going to get some royalties. Hopefully you're streaming this on, I think Tidal is right now the most ethical service. Although Amazon Music was looking weirdly good the last time I saw it. But look up what the streaming royalties are for your chosen streaming service if you haven't picked one to pay for. But anyway, you know, maybe you want to listen to this. And she has misdescribed this song so horrifically, like we know what song it was, and it's just like, oh, that's creepy. So don't, if you're not a good song describer, don't release the song and let your readers make up their own mind about it. Just describe the song as though it were an imaginary song that did the thing to you. I think that's pretty much it for fair use. Like, don't take the heart of the work and don't put it in fiction. You don't have it.
So what's the difference between this is a little bit of a segue. I'm thinking about derivative works now.
Right.
So something that is inspired by a song or something that is inspired by something.
Is your song in
Like
copyright?
where is the line between what is a derivative work? Let's start there.
Okay. So a derivative work is a work that depends for its existence on the existence of an original work. Making a derivative work is one of your bundle of sticks. So you control the right to make a derivative work. You can say yes or no about making a derivative work from your copyrighted work. This can be, a derivative work can be anything from a copy to a songfic to this is a derivative work of the Bubble Bobble video game. Copyright Nintendo ? No, Taito, 1986. This is Bub. He's green. His brother Bob is blue. They blow bubbles. My sister and I play this incessantly as kids. This is now our creepy sibling thing. She's got the blue one. This is a derivative work. This is clearly not a video game. This is clearly not a copy of a video game. This would not exist if the video game didn't exist. Fan fiction is all derivative works. Whether you call it transformative works or not, it is derivative. You do not have the right to make a derivative work, full stop, unless you have obtained a license to do that from the holder of the copyright of the original work. It does not matter if on the beginning of this fanfic you put all characters owned by DC or all characters owned by Marvel, none owned by me. This is a copyright violation. It is also a thing that you hold the copyright to, and no one can make a podfic of it without you giving them permission.
Well, that gets complicated.
It gets real complicated because now this podfic holder is sort of in double copyright violation. They have copyright in the podfic they made. If they didn't ask you, they're violating your copyright. They're also violating the original copyright because you didn't have the right to make. So when you're in, and I'm talking about this in fan fiction just because it's easy, but it's also in art. Are you making, could you make this piece of art without the prior piece of art existing? Could you make this piece of music without knowing about the other piece of music? One of the easiest ways that I tell fanfic writers, you know, even if you're going to file the serial numbers off your fan fiction, like, oh, I'm going to change all the names. This is just a bunch of other people in space who happen to have a Black communications officer, who happen to have he's an elf for their science officer, who happened to have a swashbuckling captain who's a hit with the ladies. And what's it called? It's called Space Quest. No, wait, that's already a thing. It's called, I got nothing.
Yeah, I know. I'm running out of things that
Yeah,
don't already exist.
right. And the thing is that titles are a special case for copyright, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it is an absolute rabbit hole. But obviously, James Cameron can have a movie named Avatar. You can't copyright things in such a way that you take words out of existence. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about balancing discourse with creativity, right? A while ago, if you operate in gamer circles at all, Christine, do you remember the TSR scandals?
Vaguely.
Vaguely,
That might
yeah.
have
So
that
there
might have
was
been before my gaming. I
there's
don't
a
know. I haven't
big
gamed that long.
joke that TSR stands for trademark symbol required.
Yes. Okay.
And it doesn't, but they were trying to grab, as gaming started to proliferate, as GURPS came into being, especially GURPS, which was supposed to be a universal role-playing system. And so GURPS was like, you could take these rules and apply them to any setting. And for TSR, that was a huge threat because TSR, Dungeons and Dragons, is TSR's big property, right, at the time. And Dungeons and Dragons has a ridiculously complicated, cumbersome, I hate it. And I'm trying to be as nice to it as I possibly can, but I think that it gets completely in the way of role playing. It turns role playing into role playing. System. in which you roll for everything. You roll to breathe, you roll to sneeze, and you have to know 8 different numbers that play together to figure out how well you sneezed. GURPS shows up and they say, you've got a couple of 6-sided dice. One is positive, one's negative. That's not GURPS, that's feng shui. But you've got a handful of 6-sided dice, and there's only a couple of stats, and you just combine these stats and roll. In the same way that White Wolf would later come along and say, what's even easier than 6-sided dice is 10-sided dice, because now everything is percentile. And so you have to roll a 6 or better. So you know what your odds of rolling a 6 or better are on these dice. And it made it very, very easy for the game master. So TSR started getting really protective. Like, we don't want people to take all of our hard work developing these monsters, developing these settings, developing these races, and just slap another system on it that looks simpler than ours. Because spoilers, it is simpler and better. And so obviously people would want to play with the better system if they could play in the same world. And so TSR started trying to copyright everything. And one of the things that they tried to copyright was the word Nazi.
That seems a little
Well, they tried to trademark it,
unlikely.
but so every time you use Nazi, you were, I guess, going to be talking about TSR. So their whole intellectual property thing was a mess. But the point was that they were trying to protect themselves from those creations of derivative works and from other people taking their ideas. And so you can go way down this rabbit hole of protection. And the derivative works question and the transformative works question shows up no matter what. And I want to be really clear, people who are doing physical collage art are not in this space, because there is a thing called the right of first sale or first purchase. And under that doctrine, if you acquire an object, this is copyrighted. This box, this packaging is copyrighted. Somebody put some work into it. If you have a magazine, or let's just take a magazine, right? Like, it's got a bunch of articles, it's got a bunch of ads. Maybe you're going to make a collage. Maybe the people who take the Barbie dolls and make Barbie doll dioramas and things, and the people who take the My Little Ponies and repaint them, right? Those are all derivative works. But what they're doing is they have already purchased one physical copy. And at that point, everybody who needs to be paid for that physical copy has been paid. So now you have purchased one physical copy, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can take all the paint off that My Little Pony and turn it into a demon pony, and it doesn't violate anybody's copyright, because this is your object now. You're not representing this as something else. You can take all of the heads off the Barbie dolls and put them on your wall. Yes, it's a derivative work technically, but it's already been sold. Everyone's been paid for everything up to the point where that copy came into the world, and you own the copy. This does not apply to digital collage. You must purchase the rights to each image that you use for digital collage. But it does apply to physical collage.
So are you then able to turn around and sell that object that you've created?
Yeah, it's yours. You can do what you want with it.
Okay.
It's yours. No different than a used book sale.
So then, kind of back on fan fiction a little bit, what about all of the fan fiction floating out there? I know you read a lot of it. You haven't made that a secret.
No, not a secret.
But and I think in general it's available for free in a lot of places. What is that
whether
kind of an
you're
under the
charging for,
radar thing.
okay, so culturally we are in a moment where, number one, one of the social agreements that we have with fanfic. Oh, the thing that I was going to say earlier about fanfic, even if you file the serial numbers off, you can tell that it's a fanfic because the people are never adequately described. Their relationships are never adequately described. You're supposed to know what they look like and what they sound like from reading the original media. You're supposed to know who is older and who's younger because you have seen them in the movie. So one of the social contracts that we have right now around fan fiction and around transformative works is that they actually increase the appetite for the original work consumption. And so even though it is a copyright violation, unless the person is selling it, it is not socially, usually, unless you are Anne Rice or the estate of Anne Rice, whose opinions on fan fiction are well known. You can look that up anytime. It's not worth it to go after a creator who is not profiting off your work and who is increasing the likelihood that others will encounter and purchase your work. This is how The Hunt for Gollum gets made, which was fan fiction. It was absolutely fan fiction. It was it came out in what, 2010? 9 or 10. Which I only know if it came out, it must have been 10. And it was like the Lord of the Rings movies had been made. The Hunt for Gollum is a piece of fan fiction about the time spent trying to track Gollum down. You remember how like Gandalf shows back up and he knows all about the ring now, and Smeagol and Deagol and all of that? The Hunt for Gollum talks about that process, about the process of coming by that information. And among other things, I am way oversimplifying, but the creators were filming it, I think, in New Zealand. Somebody's going to come in and tell me how wrong I am. While you're in the comments section, like and subscribe. Correct me. Do it. But it was not being filmed with permission. It was not being filmed with permission from the Tolkien estate. It was not being filmed with permission from whichever studio owns Lord of the Rings. I don't know. Is that Universal? Anyway,
I don't know.
whichever studio owns Lord of the Rings. And what ended up happening was people were like, we could sue you out of existence, or we could look at this and say, you know, this is actually like an interesting addition to canon. We will offer you a license and take a cut of your profits instead of just crushing you like a bug. These are your two options. Because you should have come to us and tried to license it. And we agree you might not have been able to license it. You're right. Sometimes it really is easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But
that shouldn't encourage people to send their fan fiction to an author and say, hey, look at this great thing I wrote based on your. I've spoken to
the only
authors who are
author I
like,
know that reads their own fanfic is Neil Gaiman. Who absolutely reads his own fanfic. Who else reads fanfic? Oh, David Tennant, I think, reads fanfic.
so
I
funny.
know, yeah, no, I know he does. Well, I take it back. Is it Tennant or Sheen that read all of the Good Omens fanfic and got on Tumblr about it? So that was intense. That was very intense.
But generally
Tennant.
speaking, it's probably not a great idea to fully, admit to the author that you are.
Look, here's the thing. Here's the thing that freaks me out is when people send like really explicit fanfic to actors of their characters. And RPF freaks me out for other reasons. There's a whole discussion to be had there. That's not a copyright question. There are persona rights that people have, especially famous people, that they can protect. There's a whole different we have an hour, guys. I'm trying to cover a lot. So what we talked about? We talked about derivative works. We've talked about using pieces of other people's work in yours. Do it with permission. Don't do it if you can't get permission. If you cannot foresee a way to get permission to use that work, don't use it. And here's the thing, not just because it's not ethical, not just because whatever, but because if you make that integral to your work, you will not be able to get published. You will not be able to get published. And if you are published, if you self-publish and it is discovered that you were stealing intellectual property in your work, e-publishers are going to yank your books, all of them. So don't do it. Why would you mess yourself up like that?
There's actually something going on right now with a poet who apparently has just been stealing stuff and getting it published all over the place. And like there's this whole cascade of the publications that are pulling these poems as they discovered that they were actually written by somebody else and published in other publications under the original author's name.
Yeah.
And it's a huge deal.
And there are people who will absolutely gamble on that. And then you have things like, 50 Shades, which everybody knows is a Twilight fanfic. And again, to borrow something from Jenny Trout, thank you, Jenny. You can tell that it's a fanfic because none of the decisions make sense unless the characters are the original characters. For example, there is a sequence in which the characters are being stalked and they don't just go to the police, which is what you do when you are a wealthy white man and a wealthy white woman who are being stalked. This is what you do. And the police in the books have been presented as relatively sympathetic, if not necessarily competent. But if you're a vampire, of course you can't go to the police. And that's why they didn't go to the police in the original. There are so many, pieces like that. So it's another reason to not just file the serial numbers off your fan fiction. And for the same reason, trying to file the serial numbers off something that is inherently racist, like the goblins in Harry Potter, doesn't work. So if you're like trying to fix Harry Potter, but you've left the goblins in, there is no part of the characterization of goblins in Harry Potter that does not come from an anti-Semitic stereotype. None. They are completely, and do I think that Jo Rowling deliberately put an anti-Semitic stereotype in her book? I actually don't. I'm not here to defend her, but I actually don't think that she's like, oh, let me put a big anti-Semitic stereotype in. I think that she took an existing folkloric creature and never thought about it. And that every part of the creature that she took, except for the parts that she actually filed off, she's like, well, let me reduce this to a purer essence of what this creature is supposed to be. And so she took out everything that wasn't anti-Semitic, ironically. But that's what happens when you just try to change it just enough. It's still going to be recognizable, and you're still going to be, I don't want to say you're going to get caught. Like, people violate copyright all the time and don't get caught. What have we not talked about? Oh, ideas and characters. This is my cocktail party story This is the thing that I talk about all the flippin' time. Let me see if I can look it up. It is, speaking of Neil Gaiman, Gaiman versus McFarlane Toys. And what had happened was uh, Todd McFarlane had created Spawn. And I don't know how familiar you are with that property at all. But the idea is that you have these guys with unfinished business who get to come back from hell and finish their business. But they are demon spawn and they have all these powers. And a number of them exist throughout history. And so Todd McFarlane wrote the original Spawn. There was a movie. There's the soundtrack. I really like the Spawn soundtrack. If you hate the Spawn soundtrack, go away. It's very of its time, but that's fine with me. That's fine. But so there were a bunch of spin-off books, and obviously like McFarlane is not going to write, and at this time he's creating this sort of empire of comics and the sort of edgy comics, and so he gets Neil Gaiman to write for one of the comics. And if you look at the end of most graphic novels that Gaiman publishes, you will see scripts that he writes in the back. He likes to be really transparent about his writing process, which I like. I like that for all of us. And they look just like movie scripts. Like you see, first panel, you see from the back a silhouette. You can't tell very much about this person other than they are very tall and there are little flames on their shoulders. And then there's a little bit of back and forth with the artist, and then the final panel goes out to be inked. And so the reason that I love the opinion in Gaiman versus McFarlane is that Justice Posner of the Seventh Circuit, clearly either he or his law clerks sat down and read a bunch of Spawn, like a bunch of Spawn, and clearly enjoyed it very much. So there's like really good synopsis of what's going on, and it's all stories like it's got all the names, it's got the demons' names in it, it's got a summary. And then we have this thing where Gaiman produces a rough description of a character, which is, I don't think it's even referred to as medieval Spawn in the comics. The issue sells very well. McFarlane is still building this empire, and he is making all of these. The toys were real big at the time. This is pre-Funko Pop, but I think this is actually a McFarlane object of American Mickey's Alice, and as a toy maker they were huge, and so they produced a toy. Don't at me if you think they're minifigs, they're toys. A toy of medieval Spawn. And Neil Gaiman said, wait a minute, that's my character. I created that character. I did not license you. All of these sticks have substicks. Derivative works stick, physical derivative works. Use the character in other books. Make a toy of the character. Make a plush toy of the character. What else? Oh, translations of works. All of these things. And Gaiman's like, I licensed you to use this character in a comic book. That's the only right I gave up, was you get to use the character. I sold you the script so that you could use the character in a comic book. I did not sell you the character to use in a toy. I did not sell you the character to use in a movie, just the book. And McFarlane said, no, you made the work for hire, that we own the character now. And so there's a big question, is the script or is the character? And I will let you guys read that to see how it came out. Because like all copyright decisions, it's very fact intensive. So I don't want to give you a blanket rule. Kidding. Spoilers. Character is Neil's. It's his. Did not license toy rights. Usually in these cases, the court's remedy is they will force a license. If you cannot afford to pay a licensing fee, or if you feel that that would bankrupt you, don't take a, well, that cat's out of the bag approach to your fan fiction book or to your made from scratch for profit toy. If you can afford to pay a mandatory licensing fee and you don't care if you let the court guess what that should be, just be aware that the mandatory licensing fee is not going to be in any way based on what you can afford. It is going to pretend that you are another mega corporation on the level of Disney and that you should be paying Disney for that use of that mouse.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who could do that.
See also why there are no Studio Ghibli patterns on Ravelry anymore. Because when Disney got the rights to reproduce and sell derivative works of Ghibli movies in the US, they went on a rampage. And so you cannot find a Totoro pattern on Ravelry.
That's really interesting. So
you can find the pattern, but you can't find the pattern.
I'm a writer. I want to sell a story to a publication. What exactly am I selling them? What rights am I, in the standard contract, let's say?
There's no standard contract. There's no such thing as a standard contract.
What should I be looking out for?
First of all, know what rights you could have.
The bundle of sticks.
Know your bundle of sticks. Figure out what can be done with your work. Figure out what that publisher is likely to want or need to do with your work and sell them that. Some publishers, especially like an anthology, they're going to say, we want exclusive publication rights in all languages for 5 years. Because after 5 years, they figure they've sold every copy of that anthology they're going to sell based on your writing. Or 10 years or 15 years. There comes a point where you're like, I may want to recollect this in the greatest works of Christine. So you might not want to sell them that for 20 years. You might not want to sell them perpetual rights. You might want to. You might not care. One thing that is coming up a lot lately, and especially with the advent of better AI reading, is audiobook rights. Do you want your audiobook rights? Do you want to reserve your audiobook rights? Are you going to get paid more if this anthology decides to make an audiobook later? I want to go on record as saying I'm very much in favor of audiobooks. I think that audiobooks let a lot of people who would not be able to access books access them. I don't care what format you consume your media in. Do what brings you joy. If you are dyslexic, if you're blind, if you have other vision issues, if you're nursing a baby and you can't flip and hold a book and a baby at the same time,
that was me.
Enjoy your books. Support live people reading. Other than the audiobook I'm listening to right now, it's probably always going to be better. The audiobook I'm listening to right now, the reader has a fundamental mispronunciation of one of the place names, and it bothers me. and I'm angry that the publisher didn't catch it. Sorry about my giant cat, everybody. She's baby. This is how we um but you know what rights you have. There are a lot of organizations. I'm not trying to get caught up in the how do you pronounce Sifla debate. I pronounce it Sifla. Now you know exactly where I'm from in the US. But they have a sample contract. They have many sample contracts and many discussions of contracts that are available, whether or not you're a member. I believe Horror Writers of America also has many sample contracts and discussions. Look at what is the market rate for a story. I apologize that it hasn't really changed since Little Women. Look at what rights other authors have. Make connections. Come join us on our Discord, get on other Discords, get on, I can't not pronounce it, shitter. Blue Sky, get on, which always looks like Blue Ski to me, because I'm Polish. And get on social media, get on media, make contacts with authors, be in spaces where authors are talking about their books and their rights. Don't just trust, like, a while ago, and I don't know if they're still offering this, a couple of very well-known authors, who I'm not going to name by name because they are, if you are not familiar with the puppies scandal, they are puppies. And I'm not going to name them by name because I would like to not get swatted this year. We're running a how to self-publish with a loss leader course. And this may work if you are a white man who is already very successful with your own books through traditional publishing. It did not work, as far as I know, for literally any other author who took the course. What it did do, however, was funnel a lot of money into the puppies. So don't just be like, oh, well, I can take this course or I'm going to get on Wattpad. A lot of those platforms, we're going to talk a lot about this later this year, in terms of self-publishing and how to recognize exploitation in both traditional and self-publishing environments. But to protect your copyright rights, read your contract carefully. Don't be afraid to ask questions about it, but don't come in freaking out. By which I mean, we run a writing competition here at Yeah Right. And every time we run our writing competition here at Yeah Right, somebody writes in, this is a never-ending cycle of cats, guys. Yes, Horatio Hornblower, how are you? And now he's afraid of the dog. Every time we run this competition, someone asks, why do you need the right to publish and distribute my story? You can't have that. I'm not sending it to you to publish. I'm sending it to you for, we have to be able to send the story to our judges, which legally is distributing your story and republishing your story. We have to have the right to reproduce your story because we have to send one copy of your story to more than one judge. We have to be able to reproduce the story to do that. We have to be able to make and send copies internally. Without your license to do that, we can't give your story to the judge. You can't get judged. You can't win. I guess, like, objectively, people don't enter a competition on the assumption that they will win, but I do like to maximize my chances of winning. And
So
I really
getting the
don't
story
like
to the
do
judge is the first step.
yeah. Getting the word to the judge is a necessary step towards winning. You literally cannot win if we can't judge your story. So stuff like that. And a lot of times, do look at those sample contracts from Safwa. from HWA, from other sources, and you will get a sense of what the list of things that can be in a contract is. And so once you know what can be there, you'll notice if they just say all, or if they say all United States rights, and then you have all of your other rights. Because when you hold a copyright, you don't sell, license, or give away anything you don't want to. You don't, well, okay. That's bad phrasing. Anything you don't explicitly give away stays with you. So read the words. If you have questions about, well, why do you need to do this? Ask them. People are happy to explain if they say, you know, why do you need the right to distribute? Well, we need to be able to send it to our judges. Would you be more comfortable if we say the right to distribute during the term of the contest, which is, I think, the actual language that's in our contract is during the term of the contract. Yes. So you hold all your copyrights, you give us these rights for a very short period of time, and then they revert to you. Congratulations, you have all your copyright rights again. Go sell this story to somebody. It's great. Is there anything else? Did we cover anything else brilliant last session? Was I smart?
I think we covered, this was pretty much everything. We talked about copyright expiration a little bit, right? Starting with Mickey Mouse. That was
Yep.
something that we wanted to make sure we touched on.
Talked
Yeah,
about
I think we
talked about no
yep,
fear in fiction. Talked about
the bundle of rights.
bundle of rights, a license for a period of time, exclusive rights. There's more. I could talk about this literally until my voice is my voice giving out until my voice gave out, but we'll save some mystery. No, but if you do have specific questions, come talk about them on our Discord link. There's a link. Join us. You know you want to.
Love to have you.
But you know, and sometimes we're gonna say, I don't talk to a lawyer. But but it's going to be there. And this year, I'm really excited about this year. And one of the reasons that we did copyright this month was you have to have this basis of understanding for everything we're going to talk about this year. Whether it is, oh, there's one. We talked about crit groups in the cursed session.
Right. If I
What if,
share my work with
what if,
a crit
yeah,
group.
that is bundle of sticks, that's a license. You have given those people a license to have your work, maybe to make a derivative work, which is a marked up work or an edited work. You have not given them the right to republish. You've given them the right to do it for as long as it takes for the crit group and to return it to you. Those rights revert. If somebody takes your story and publishes it, nope, violation of your copyright. Your story is already copyrighted when you hand it to them. You copyright adheres on creation. You made a thing, you handed it over to them with a license to critique and return. You have not given them the right to republish. You certainly haven't given them the right to republish under your own name. It is protected. It is still protected if they, excuse me, if they kind of change a little bit about it and publish it, they've made a derivative work. It's not an authorized derivative work. This happens all the time in publishing, I will say. And you'll see it. You will see a lot of, you know, this author took this passage, these ideas, this journey from this more obscure book. It's often a white author. It's often stealing from an author of color to produce a more authentic book for the white author. Happens all the time. I don't want to like put you off publishing, or what you like, you're a writer, you're here,
Or
you're
crit groups for that
or
matter.
crit groups. Crit groups are
Yeah.
so important, but know your crit group. Maybe hang out for a couple of sessions, get a feel for if any of the people feel shady to you. If they feel shady to you, move on. Move on. I definitely have stories of close friends who have had and again, it's not necessarily copyrightable, but who have had their story concepts stolen by people in their crit group. Um some of these people are better known than others. And it's just like a question of like, where did you get this idea? And also, frankly, sometimes you hear something and you don't remember hearing it. So before you accuse someone in your crit group of stealing from you, maybe sit down and say, hey, you remember last year when you read my story XYZ? I see you just sold this thing and it looks really similar. So I have some concerns ethically. Like, do we want to talk about this? Should we be talking about this? And you have a lot of choices at that point, some of which are more adversarial than others. And this is what I was talking about. Like, the court is going to give you like a remedy that's probably a license. They may make you stop selling. You could hypothetically destroy their relationship with the publisher. You could also hypothetically get crushed by them, depending on how well known they are. You might be able to get co-author credit. You might be able to get an acknowledgement. These are things that will, I don't know, among other things, make you Hugo eligible, if that is a thing that matters to you in the science fiction world. Um, or other award eligible. I'm thinking about the Hugos right now because of the scandal with the Hugos again. Um, RIP the validity of Hugos award. But
That's a
whole different
different panel.
whole different. I've already talked about puppies. Let's not just get this video yanked. But so all of these considerations go into it, but I will tell you that if someone reads your story and after that produces a story that is using the same plot line, character structure, everything, that is probably an unauthorized derivative work, and then you need to think about what you want to do about that. Because again, I keep saying copyright is a creature of contract. There are legally things that describe copyright, but what you do with it. So people are like, well, especially like as a lawyer, people will come up to me and they'll say, this happened and then this happened. Can they do that? I'm like, I haven't read your contract. Until I read your contract, I don't know if you let them do that or not. And they're like, well, but can they legally? I'm like, I don't know because I don't know what you told them they could do. So, so know your contracts, know your contract rights. But this is what we need to know to go ahead and talk this year about publishing, which is near and dear to my heart. So this month, copyright. Next month, we're talking about markets. We're talking about gaze. We're talking about who you are, who you're writing for, how to identify that. Not just like, oh, I'm writing science fiction, but are you writing for adults? Are you writing for people? Is your writing only going to be comprehensible and inoffensive to people who share your cultural background, your physical background, your racial background? Is your writing inoffensive? Um, inoffensive.
Yeah.
I hate that word. I hate offensive. Um, because I'd rather just come out and say, is your shit racist? Honestly. But also like, is this borderline? Does this have a bunch of microaggressions in it that you don't know? Are you cat number 3? No, you're cat number 2 again. Who are you writing for? Who is going to want to read this? Who do you think wants to read this? And what are you doing to make it accessible to them and interesting to them and let them connect to it? Instead of just saying, this is a children's book because it has children in it, and then you end up with the thing where like Legend of the Overfiend is shelved next to the Thundercats. Thank you, 90s. That was a wild time. It was a real
But
wild
also,
time to rent a video.
but also not just knowing what you're writing, but where you are sending it, knowing your markets,
Yeah.
which has a
Yeah,
um,
knowing your readers, knowing the readers in the
exactly
market, um,
who wants to
who they
publish this.
center, who they market to, who they
Mhm.
prioritize. Um, all of these things. So I'm really excited to work with that. We don't have our full slate of panelists yet. I would love to tease that. But it's gonna be good and it's gonna be
Great.
fun and it's gonna be a little bit challenging. And then we've got just a ton of other topics coming up this year. How do you an editor? How do you a publisher? How do you publish yourself? What is your traditional publisher's job? What is their relationship with you? Um, what is your job as you self-publish? What do you need to do to be successful at any of these things? So hopefully we're all gonna get through 2024 and come out the other side much better prepared to be published authors. Right? Right?
That's the goal.
I think you're more published than me at this point. I think I'm more
I mean,
published in academia and you're more published in like the places I want to be published, which is great. All right.
on the flip side, you get a paycheck.
Oh yeah, I do love that paycheck. Go academia. Maybe not go academia. We will see you next
All
month, folks. Thank you.
right.